Emily de Sousa. I'm a fisheries scientist and a content creator based in Canada, but my family is originally from the Azores Islands, and so I love all things Portugal, especially Portuguese seafood. And I'm very excited to be the latest guest on Portugal the Simple Life podcast.
Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal the Simple Life, and I'm really happy to be joined here by Emily de Sousa. Emily, for you, it's almost bon dia. Bon dia, boa tarde. It's on the limit there.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Have you had lunch yet?
I have not.
It's bon dia because it's only boa tarde after lunch. So
I like that.
Bon dia. Thank you for being on the podcast. How are you today?
Good. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. Awesome. So you're sitting all the way in Niagara Falls. So we've got some hours between us. But thank you so much for joining us. And maybe you can just start off telling us a little bit about you.
Yeah, for sure. My name is Emily, and my family is from Portugal. This is my connection. So my family actually has roots in the Azores Islands.
Okay,
So my mom's side of the family is from Terceira, and my dad's side is from Pico. And we actually have a house in Pico, so we spend quite a bit of time there. That's like my favorite place in the world. And I work as a fisheries scientist and a content creator. And I also run a media agency in the seafood industry. So I am very deeply ingrained in the seafood world, which just gives me another excuse to always come back to Portugal because, of course, Portugal has, in my opinion, some of the best seafood in the world.
I'm not going to argue with you about that one. I actually had some. I had some for lunch, so I'm not going to tell you what I had because I don't want you to get hungry or your stomach to start growling halfway through the episode. We got in touch because of the work that you're doing with Emily by the Sea, and that took you to Portugal. So we'll get on to that, and we will talk about seafood because it's something that our listeners need to know about.
Absolutely.
But take me back to your kind of memories of Portugal through your parents. How have they kept that link alive? And what do you remember as a kid about Portugal, even though you didn't live here?
Yeah, I think for me, so my grandparents were the ones who immigrated to Canada from Portugal. So my parents were also born here in Canada, but Portuguese, culture and everything about Portugal has always surrounded me growing up, specifically in terms of food. I feel like that is definitely something that my whole family was really intentional about making sure that, every family gathering always had Portuguese food. And so it was a nice way, especially growing up, to always transport myself back to Portugal. I took my first trip to Pico actually when I was pretty young, and I feel like I still have memories of it, of like swimming in the ocean and all like the lava rock, and it just being so drastically different from anything that I knew, back home. And then when I was a teenager, I started traveling to Portugal on my own, both the mainland and the Azores, and I feel like every time I go back, I'm still uncovering new facets of the country and realizing all these different things that, I learned when I was younger and seeing them come to life like through a different lens now that I'm older is always quite interesting. But
Yeah.
yeah, despite the fact that, we weren't born there and, I never really lived there. I just, vacation there and, now spend quite a bit of time there. My family always did a really good job, I feel like, of keeping Portuguese culture alive in our home. And I have a grandmother here who was born in Terceira, and she was the one who immigrated here, and really actually doesn't speak English very, very well, despite the fact that she's been here so long. Portuguese is her primary language, and so staying in communication with her, I feel like has also been a really important way for me to like maintain that the history and the culture and of course the language. Every time I speak to her, I have to practice my Portuguese, and she loves to tell me stories of her time, as a child in Terceira and how different things are. She loves seeing photos of, my trips and how things have changed and whatnot. So I feel like having that connection, when I'm not able to be physically in Portugal is a super great way to just like keep it alive even when I'm not physically there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, what I'm going to do this in two steps. kind of what did you learn about the Portuguese, the way they look at the world, the way they are culturally as a young girl from from your grandmother? What were some of those things that you stuck out that if someone had to say to you, what are Portuguese like? What from your grandmother would you be able to share?
I think like the first thing that comes to mind is that Portuguese people are very resilient. Especially, the Azores. I mean, Portugal, as an entire country, obviously went through very difficult times,
Yeah,
not in the very distant past. And so for people like my grandmother, like those difficult times are very like still fresh in her memory. And
for
she,
sure.
still recalls what it was like to live through that. And, being from the Azores, I think also adds another layer of that, being like a small island chain in the middle of the Atlantic with limited opportunities, posed its own set of challenges.
Yeah,
And I just remember hearing, all these different stories growing up and thinking like, wow, they, despite the odds being stacked against them and despite all these challenges, like they found a way to make it work. They were very resilient. They did whatever they had to do to, provide for their families and keep their families together. Even thinking about how terrifying it must have been to leave these tiny islands and everything that to come to a country where, you don't know the language, you don't know what's waiting for you on the other side. And my grandparents actually landed in a region that's quite far from where we are now. That was like very snowy and cold. So also just a completely different
yeah,
climate from what you're used to. And yeah, like the courage and bravery, which I think, if you look back in history of Portuguese sailors and being the original like discoverers of a lot of the world, that takes an insane amount of courage to just like go out into the ocean and have no idea what's waiting for you. And I
yeah.
think, that shines true when you think about these Portuguese immigrants who came to Canada, having no idea what was waiting for them on the other side, and just knowing like whatever it is, we're going to make it work.
Yeah, 100%. And then let's take a step forward. I mean, you've come as a child. I love Azores. I don't know all of the islands. My wife's sister, they lived on San Miguel,
Okay.
and we visited. Trying to think now, must be a good 7 years ago, I think it was. And it's like
Mhm.
another planet. I mean, yeah, when you talk about the
Yeah.
lava rocks, I remember being I can't remember the name of the beach, but you're kind of in the middle of these rock pools, and there's the cold ocean coming in, and then the springs coming out of the rocks,
Yes.
and it's just like, where am I? This just feels like
Yeah.
Mars or something. And then it starts raining, and the steam comes off the water. It's just like, okay, this is just a sensory overload. It was just
Yeah.
incredible, and yeah, you think about these small communities in the middle of the ocean, and then when you add your grandmother's thing to it of during the difficult times and the dictatorship, what it must have been like, it's insane.
Mm-hmm.
But having visited now and coming back and forth, what have you learned about Portugal in your travels? About the culture, about yeah, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of what I've learned recently has really been focused in, food and wine and hospitality because this is really the realm where I work and play, and my fiance being a winemaker,
Okay,
these things are always top of mind when we come to Portugal, and so I feel like for us, we've just learned so much about the food culture and the wine culture, and specifically thinking about food. One thing that I found so interesting is, again, talking about growing up traditional Portuguese food was always at all the family gatherings. And so I grew up around a lot of these traditional dishes. And I think for me, it's been really interesting to see how Portuguese chefs today have really, I think, done a really good job of preserving those traditional dishes and the cultural significance behind them. But then you're also seeing, especially in, some of the main cities like Lisbon and Porto, you're seeing these like young, innovative chefs come in and put like modern twists on these cultural classics. And they do so in a way that still honors the history and tradition of these dishes, but brings, like I don't know, a little bit more intricacy into the dishes. And I think like that's so cool to see the chef movement and how food is changing in Portugal, but still, again, like remaining true to the roots. And even on the wine side, we spent a lot of time in the Douro Valley and just like looking at the landscape in the Douro Valley and thinking, like, how hundreds of years ago did people look at these incredibly steep hills and think like, that's where we're going to plant grapes, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah. 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 Have you been to
Yeah.
Madeira?
I have not. That is actually the top of our list for honeymoon destination.
Okay, so there we go. There's a connection. Myself and my wife, we honeymooned in Madeira. It
Okay.
was kind of by default in some ways because we were supposed to honeymoon in Italy, but COVID happened and that was kind of
Oh,
ground
okay.
zero. And then we ended up honeymooning in Madeira because you could still fly to Portugal.
Uh-huh.
And it's awesome. Like, and there as well, you drive around there and you look and you say, who decided that, okay, this we were going to build a village or this is where
Yeah.
we're going to plant banana plantations. And it's just insane. And you think they did this hundreds of years ago. How was it even possible? It's the door gives you that feeling as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a beautiful landscape, and to see what they built from it is so. I'm just like, I don't know, I guess my brain doesn't work that way. I would have never, looked at that valley and seen, I guess, the potential, and clearly, hundreds of years ago, people did, and they saw the potential, and now it's grown into, in my opinion, one of like the most beautiful wine regions in the world.
Okay. And you and your fiance, you're going to be getting married in the Douro.
We
And for him
are.
as a winemaker, this must be heaven
Yes.
coming to Portugal.
Yeah,
Like who's more in their
he
element
loves it.
actually, you or him, you know?
It's totally him. It is, yeah, and he's absolutely in his element. And we visited the Douro together for the first time. I'd never been to the Douro Valley before, and we went 3 years ago. We actually did a big trip. We drove from Lisbon to Porto, and we stopped, at some of the other like Bairrada and some of the other wine regions on our way up to Douro.
Yeah.
And when we got to the Douro Valley, we were both just completely awestruck. And, we've traveled quite a bit, specifically, to different wine regions and some of the most famous wine regions in, like France and Italy and Spain. And they're all beautiful and special, but I think we're both in agreement that there's nowhere like the Douro Valley. Again, like the landscape is so stunning. You're just looking at a hill with rows of
Yeah.
vines planted. You're looking at these crazy steep valleys with this beautiful river. And yeah, we knew, I think, from the moment that we got there that this was going to be the spot where we had to get married. I think, the second we got engaged, it wasn't even a question. We just immediately started looking at venues in the Douro Valley. We didn't even consider anywhere else.
Amazing. Amazing. And then, I mean, let's talk about your work. So how did Emily by the Sea and all of that and the work that you're doing, how did that happen? How did that start for you?
Yeah, so I have always loved, like writing and traveling and adventuring. I think I was inspired a lot, by people like Anthony Bourdain growing up and that sort of like zest for life and adventure. And so I actually started a travel and food blog back in 2015 when I was just starting my undergrad. And I was doing this kind of like off the side of my desk. It was a side hustle, and I wanted to grow it into something. And then COVID hit. And so in 2020, I lost, all of those clients that I had been working for in the travel space. Everything kind of just like shuttered overnight. All of the
Yeah.
trips that I had planned, everything was getting canceled. And I realized, okay, we have to pivot here because this is not gonna work. And by the time COVID hit, I was also in my master's program, and I was studying seafood. And I was specifically looking at the role of global seafood in food security because I went to the University of Guelph here in Canada, which is called Canada's Food University. And it has a very beautiful, very expensive research institute that's dedicated to finding solutions to global food security. And I also did my undergrad at the school. And while I was in my undergrad, I was realizing that we had all these brilliant people studying food security and all this money being poured into this research, but nobody was looking at seafood. And, growing up in a Portuguese household, seafood is front and center, top of mind all the time. And so to me, it was crazy that no one was talking about seafood. And so that's why I ultimately went on to do my master's program
Well,
to figure out how seafood fits into this equation. And so all of this was happening at the same time. And I realized, I was at a point with this travel and food blog where I needed to pivot. I was doing this really interesting research that I felt like wasn't being communicated effectively enough just because of the red tape and bureaucracies of academia. It just doesn't allow for knowledge transfer in a very conducive way. And so I just thought, what would happen if I started talking about seafood online? I built up a following. I'd already
Mm.
been in like the travel and food space. I felt like that was really travel and food are at the intersection of, sustainable seafood anyway. And so, yeah, in 2020, I rebranded my travel blog to Seaside with Emily, and I started talking about sustainable seafood, where seafood comes from. I started talking about seafood travel, and then as soon as, things opened up again, I started traveling again and talking about seafood. I would visit different farms and fisheries and show people where their seafood came from. And then still work in the tourism and hospitality space, visiting different restaurants and working with tourism boards. I've worked with tourism boards all over Portugal and, different airlines in Portugal and hotels in Portugal to showcase, how Portuguese seafood can kind of be at like the center of a Portuguese vacation and show people why seafood should be at the center of a Portuguese vacation. I mean, Portugal, I think, consumes more seafood per capita than any other country in the world. So I feel like to really get the experience of the tourists there, you have to indulge in the seafood.
Yeah. So even I think about our trip to the Azores. I remember we went to a little seaside town. There's nothing in that town except for one restaurant, and you
Hmm.
go there and you sit down, and the first thing that you have to have is lapis, and they're
Hmm.
these huge, juicy things. And for anybody that doesn't know what lapis is, Google it, or follow Emily because they're just this delicious thing that comes from the ocean, and they don't complicate it. They just fry them up, some olive oil, some garlic, a bit of lemon, and yeah, it's amazing. And then, even along the coastline where I live here on the Silver Coast, there's certain places where people just go to that town or go to that seaside village because of a restaurant, because of the food. Um, and it's just amazing. We don't travel in Portugal without a food destination in mind. We don't.
Yeah.
The thing I had to learn from my wife was, no, we're not just going to go to a random town on a weekend. First, let's see if there's a good restaurant in that town or near that castle or whatever it is, and then we'll go. So the food is the epicenter. It's got to work.
Totally.
It's got to work. Um, but one of the things I have clients from all over the world, and they're looking to come to Portugal, and the thing that
Hmm.
they always talk about is the freshness of our food here.
Hmm.
I mean, from the vegetables, the fruit, the meat, but maybe you can just talk a bit more about the seafood and
Yeah.
why is the fish so good in this country?
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat Portugal, I think, in terms of, fresh, high quality seafood. I mean, look at all that coastline. It's a small country, but it's got a massive, massive coastline. And so there's a lot of opportunities for fishermen to go out and catch some really great fish and really unique fish that you can't always find around the world. I mean, lapis is one example. You can, in the Azores, just scrape those off the rock and eat them right then and there. Not, I will say, not my personal preferred way to eat them. I do love them with the butter and and the garlic, but simple and fresh either way. And I think one of the things that I love doing in Portugal is going to the fish markets. My personal favorite one is the one in Matosinhos, which is just outside of Porto. And I love that one because I think it's a great tourist experience because you can actually go into the market and wander all the stalls, and then you can pick your fish that has all been caught and landed that morning, and one of the restaurants in the market will cook it for you so you can enjoy seafood that's literally just been pulled from the
Yeah.
ocean right then and there. And they obviously do a great job cooking it, and it's like a really cool experience that I feel like is connecting people one step closer than just going to a restaurant would. It's like you actually get to go speak with the fishmonger, and they're all like super nice and helpful and can walk you through all the different species, and then you get to eat this seafood that was literally just pulled from the water. And I think it's so cool, and I think like a really authentically Portuguese experience.
We had a Michelin chef on the podcast. He's got 2 stars, I think it is now. He might be getting 3 soon, but he has a restaurant down in the Algarve now. One of the things that he spoke about is that they don't overfish
Mm.
out here. Uh, you've done a bit of a deeper dive into fishing and fish farming and
Mhm.
all of that. And it's something that now over the last, thanks to like Netflix and these documentaries and stuff, more and more people are actually
Yeah.
thinking, where does my fish come from? How was it farmed or made, or how were they bred? What are they doing right here in terms of fishing, in your opinion, on the Portuguese coast? Because there's a lot of places where there's a big coastline. It doesn't necessarily mean they're doing things the right way. But what, in your opinion, are they doing right here in terms of that side of things, the fishing side of things?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, one of the interesting things about, well, one of the things that's different, I guess, from where I am anyway, is that in Portugal, the fisheries and aquaculture is governed by the EU. And so there's the EU fisheries policy, which kind of governs all the fisheries there. Whereas where I am in Canada, it's quite different. Most of it is governed federally, and then some of it is provincially, but we don't have like a big um, overarching body like the EU, which I guess is doesn't just apply to fisheries. I think it applies to
A few
everything.
things, yeah.
Yeah. And so the EU, I think is a really good global leader in terms of fisheries policy. And I think because of that collaborative nature, like they have to be. And one of the other things that I think people should keep in mind about Portugal and, specifically about the Azores is this is this is a resource that is incredibly important to them for not only food security, but also economic livelihoods. And I always, come back to this too because of the Azores, because the fishermen know that if they overfish, if they deplete the resource, if they abuse the resource, that's it. There's going to be nothing left for them. Like that's the end of food security and job security. And
Mm.
so I always argue that I actually think, fishermen oftentimes can be some of the greatest stewards of the ocean. And, not just fishermen, but farmers and people who work on the water are oftentimes the greatest stewards of the ocean because they see firsthand every single day what's at stake and what there is to lose. And they truly recognize the impact of fishing sustainably and farming sustainably and what it looks like to not do it sustainably and what that would mean for them and their financial security and their, family and the food security of their community. And so I think, just in my experience and the fishermen that I've had the chance of meeting and speaking with in Portugal, I think they really recognize the magnitude of almost like the responsibility that's on them to extract the resource in order to support the community, but also do so in a way that allows for future generations to
Yeah.
do that. And I
I mean,
also think, yeah,
is that, sorry, I mean,
go
is
ahead.
that part of their conversations with you? Is that something that they're, because I always remember many years back having an American go to one of our local farmers market and complain that there
Hmm.
weren't, I can't remember what the fruit was. And the farmer just simply said, well, it's not the season. Like, we're
Hmm.
not going to farm this fruit because it's not the season for the fruit. And it's the same with the fish.
Yeah,
There's a certain time of the
totally.
year that you get the sardines, and there's a certain time of the year that you get the carapau, and then it's
Yeah.
done. And that's something that still exists today. So is that part of their conversation? Is that stuff that they talk to you about, that, hey, we have to be careful, and this fish is for this time of the year, and then it's done?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think
Okay.
again, like they're super conscious of it and aware of it. And, obviously there's the financial security and the food security piece. And I think there's also this big cultural piece. Like, I mean, sardines are a great example. Sardines are such an icon of Portuguese culture. Nobody wants to see them overfished to the point of extinction. That I think would be, I can't even imagine like Portugal without sardines. Like that is like the cultural mascot of the country. And so I think there's that component of it too, where they recognize, yeah, we want to extract this resource. We want to provide for our communities and for our families, but we know that we have to do so in a way that allows us to continue to do this because the other thing I think about Portuguese people is that they're very proud and they're very prideful people. And so, the fisherman who is going out fishing for sardines wants to pass that tradition on to his son and his son's son and their kids and wants to like they're very proud of what they do and the hard work that they do and the same thing goes for the women who are buying the sardines and taking them to the cannery. Like they take pride in their work and they want to be able to do it for a very long time and pass it on. And so I think there is a level of mindfulness that exists, on top of like all the less sexy government regulations and
Yeah.
everything that,
Yeah.
have these safeguards in place, there is a level of mindfulness and pride and responsibility that the people who work on the water feel to make sure that, yeah, when you come to Portugal 50 years from now, you can still enjoy seafood the same way, or hopefully, in an even better way, because we've done actually better and now fisheries are even healthier than they are today.
Between my job as a realtor at Portugal Realty and hosting this podcast, life is pretty busy. But lately I've been receiving so many messages from people that want to know more about buying property here on Portugal's Silver Coast that I've got to do something about it. So starting now, for subscribers only, I'm offering up a 30-minute session per day. That's 5 30-minute sessions for a one-on-one meeting to talk about buying property here on Portugal's beautiful Silver Coast. This is for subscribers only. So please subscribe to book your session and get in touch with us through the links below via WhatsApp or email to book your session today. I'll be happy to speak to you. It's for subscribers only and it's completely free. Yeah, I like that idea of mindful, and I find that a lot. You see that across the board, not just the fisherman or the farmer, but you see that with the person at the market who
Hmm.
knows everything there is to know. I mean, I love going to the farmers market, and my wife will say to the lady selling the potatoes, we want to, we want to boil these, or we want to do potato
Hmm.
fries, and the farmer will say, okay, that's the one you should take
Yeah.
because of this and this and this. It's amazing, but you see that even in the food and the way people shop and the way that people eat is
Hmm.
when we buy fish, it's where's this fish from? And when
Yeah.
we eat fish in a restaurant and the guy brings the platter with literally the whole raw fish there saying, this is
Yeah.
good for the three of you. This is where it came from. This is when we caught it. There seems to be that mindfulness across the board, which is really interesting and lovely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think again, like the mindfulness, the pride, like I feel like my experiences at the fish market sometimes is people are always like eager to chat. Like no one is, ignoring you. It's like the second they see you, they're like, okay, let me tell you. Like I want to tell you everything about what we've got here. I'm so excited. The last time I was at the market in Matosinhos, actually, I tried the presebes for the first time, which are the gooseneck barnacles, and I'd never had them before. In part, and it's crazy because I work in seafood and I grew up around seafood, but they're such a weird
They're not
looking
the they're not the
creature.
prettiest. They're not the prettiest thing.
They're not. And I was always nervous. I was like, I don't know how to buy these. I don't know how to eat them. Like I'm, a bit embarrassed that I don't know this. And I brought it up to the gentleman who was helping us. We were doing the thing where we pick our fish and have the restaurant cook it. And I happened to mention to him, I was like, I'm really interested in perception, but I've never had them. I don't know how to eat them. He's like, I'll bring you some over so you can try them. He's like, here's how you eat them. He explained how they harvest them. He was pulling out his phone and showing like pictures. And so they're really like excited, I think, about the opportunity too. So I think that's like another thing I would tell people if you're going to Portugal, like don't even feel like any sort of embarrassment the way that I did. They're actually like excited that you don't know because it means that they get to be the ones to tell you and share that experience with you. And I was so blown away and I was so happy that I asked because otherwise I don't know when I would have ever tried them and then I would have been missing out because they are as ugly as they are. They're quite tasty.
Amazing. We had a guest on the podcast called Peter Beringer, who's a Dutch guy, and they're doing a big sustainable fish farm off the coast of
Yeah, I know Peter actually.
you know him. Okay. So I mean,
Yeah.
what's your take on because obviously the idea of fish farming has got a bit of a bad rap
Hmm.
in certain circles, but what's your take on fish farming and how it can be good or not so good?
Yeah, I think fish farming, I mean, you're right. It has a bad rap, and especially in certain parts of the world. I think, just like any other type of farming, it can be done poorly and it can be done well. There's, good ways to raise a chicken and there's bad ways. And I think the same thing goes for fish farming. I think the other piece of this is, wild fisheries can't sustain global seafood demand on their own. Even if every fishery in the world was fished completely sustainably, there's just not enough fish in the ocean, and we're a lot of people on the planet. And so we do need aquaculture and fish farming to supplement. In fact, more than half of the seafood that we eat today is already coming from aquaculture and fish farming. So I'm excited to see what Portugal does with aquaculture. I know the project that you're talking about. I ran into Peter actually in Barcelona recently, and he was telling me a little bit more about it because I think, again, just going back to the fact that there is so much coastline. And then there is so much, open ocean before you hit, the Azores or any other islands or landmass. There is an opportunity for a lot of offshore aquaculture, which exists really far from shore. So people don't necessarily see it. 'Cause I know that's a big concern with tourism, or it's not close enough, to the beach where there'd be any sort of like concerns about it being too close to people. So I'm really interested to see. I know what Peter's working on is very cool, and I know there's some
Yeah.
other stuff happening. Portugal also has a lot of really impressive like marine research institutes who I feel like are doing interesting work in this space. And I think it's only a matter of time before Portugal, really they're in the aquaculture space, but I think it's only a matter of time before they really can become a leader in the space again, just because of the culture of seafood and the areas that they're working with and the brilliant minds at the research institutes. I think there's a lot of opportunity for farm seafood in Portugal. I think there might be a little bit of it might be a little bit hard in terms of like convincing people at first, again, because
Mm,
there is such a rich, wild seafood culture in
yeah.
Portugal, and there's not necessarily a farm seafood culture depending on the species. If it's a new species, if it's a different species, it might take some work to shift people's mindsets around it. But I think, that's going to have to happen eventually. And I think Portugal's in a great position to be able to do that.
Yeah, because there is again, you talk about that mindfulness, and we're always taught here in Portugal that there's the, viveiro and there's the
Yeah.
selvagem, and be careful which ones you have. But it's super interesting. But let's shift over to when it gets to the plate, because, and I know this is cruel because you haven't had lunch, so I'm sorry, but there's one thing producing or catching really good seafood, then it's
Mhm.
about doing it. What do they do so well here? I mean, just a simple plate of fish can just be
Uh-huh.
incredible. Then there's the complex seafood dishes as well. But in your opinion, I mean, why do they do fish and seafood so well in Portugal? What do you love about it?
Yeah, I think it is that simplicity for me. I think Portugal does a really good job of really letting the fish itself shine through and not overpowering it, and just letting, the seafood be the star of the show. And I think that really speaks to the quality of the seafood that you're getting in Portugal, because if you have seafood of a lower quality that, hasn't been handled properly, and then you try to make that the star of the show with simple ingredients, like something like that probably needs a little bit more help to taste good.
Yeah,
But in Portugal, it's like they know it's top tier seafood, it's fresh, it's been handled correctly. And so it's as simple sometimes as, yeah, garlic and butter or olive oil and salt, and like they don't need to go crazy. And so I love the simple preparation. I think a lot of it also, goes down to the cultural aspect of it, and these techniques and recipes being passed down from generation to generation, and just knowing, like, I don't know, knowing the right way to do it because you've been doing it your whole life. But I think the quality of the seafood is really what makes all the difference, because if you have a high quality octopus, it's going to be a lot more forgiving than octopus that hasn't been handled properly and has maybe been, three times frozen and thawed. It's going to taste a lot different. And in Portugal, it is a premium seafood product, and they've been grilling octopus forever, and so they know how to do it. So you get that perfect texture every time. And I mean, octopus
it's crazy.
is
It's
a good
just crazy.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it took me such a long time to eat polvo because again, you eat with your eyes and it's not pretty.
Yeah.
It's not pretty when you first see it. I must say now when I see a polvo, I'm like, that looks pretty,
Yeah.
So it's changed my eyes, but I was tricked into eating it by a local guy in a restaurant here, not far from where I work, where I refused to ever have polvo at his restaurant. I would always go for the bitok or the pork no forno or the pork in the oven. And one day he said, look, we don't have any meat. There's no meat. All we've got is polvo. And I ate this polvo and like right afterwards, he put down a steak next to the people next door to me, and but it was so good. And now whenever I can, I do. Yep, and they always just get it right. I don't know.
Yeah, they
It's so
do.
simple. It's just well cooked, and then it's a little bit of olive oil, some garlic. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
can't
like
go
one of my
wrong.
favorite things to eat in Portugal, and I think part of it is like octopus, like yeah, polvo is kind of hard to cook, and so I think when I get it sometimes when I'm in North America, it's really hit or miss, and you can get people who just like don't have that like cultural experience, and so sometimes it's over. When you get the overcooked rubbery octopus like that, it's not what you
It
want.
doesn't work.
And I feel like whenever I go to Portugal, like it's always that like perfect, beautiful char grilled, like simple and so flavorful, and like the texture is always perfect. It's one of my favorite things to eat in Portugal.
There's a you've been to Nazaré, the fishing
I've
village.
never been. No, I
Okay,
know.
how dare you? You seaside with
I
Emily, and you haven't
know.
been to Nazaré. Okay,
It's been on
shame
my
on you,
list
Emily.
forever.
There's a restaurant. First, the fish market there is awesome as well. It's Portugal's or one of Portugal's oldest fishing villages. So there's this.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
become very well known because of the surfing, but
Mhm,
it's more well known amongst the Portuguese because it's a fishing village. So,
mhm.
like for my wife and I, if we go for seafood, that's where we go. Nazare is the
Yeah.
place, and the fish market there is amazing. The ladies are hardcore sales ladies. I mean,
Yeah.
they know how to sell the fish. But there's a restaurant there where the guy does a trilogy of octopus, and
Okay.
each it's a combination of octopus cooked in three different ways, and man, you will yeah, you'll be
I
very
need to
happy.
go.
You'll be very happy there. Let's talk about your top five. Let's try and narrow it down to top five dishes that you'd recommend to people.
Ooh.
Doesn't necessarily have to only be seafood, it can be a bit of seafood and a bit of fish. What are you going for?
Okay, it's going to be hard to narrow it down to
You
five.
want to do top seven?
Let's do seven. Okay, yeah.
Seven.
Well, yeah, seven I can throw in non-seafood, but for me, number one I think is lapish. I love lapish. I think also we can't really get them in North America, so it's always a treat when I go to Azores. Um, I
So
definitely
a
love the.
lapish only because yeah, you don't get them on mainland much either. Or I
No,
haven't
yeah, they're
had
just
it's
Azores.
island.
Hmm.
Is it because of the
Yeah.
lava rock? Is it because of the
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like, and don't quote me, but I feel like I remember hearing that there were some places on the mainland where you could find them, but I've never seen them on the mainland. I've only ever had them in Azores, and I think that's like part of why they're so special. It's because they're really hard
yeah?
to get.
Yeah, you have
So
Vieda,
I think
which
I'm number
is
one.
okay, but it's not lapish.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay,
So
interesting.
that
Lapish
would be
number
my
one.
number one. Yeah, I love grilled octopus poof. I could eat that every day. Like I said, when I'm in Portugal, it's so good. And again, I think both represent Portuguese seafood really well. I think the other thing that represents Portuguese seafood really well is the grilled sardines.
Yep.
Like whole sardines, again, just like
June
super
time.
simple. Yeah,
June time. We had our first grilled sardines on the barbecue on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, and yeah, can't go
it's my
wrong.
favorite thing. Yeah, yeah, you can't. It's like my favorite thing whenever we go to our house in Peak is we have like a barbecue in the back overlooking the ocean, and our cousins will come over and just grill sardines, and it's like again quintessential Portuguese seafood dish, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I also so bacalhau, obviously,
Okay, so
is
we've
the
done lapa, we've
Portuguese.
done polvo, and we've done sardine. Now we're going
Uh-huh.
bacalhau.
Bacalhau. I personally love the bacalhau brage, which is like with the like matchstick potatoes and the egg. That's my
That's
favorite
your
way to have
childhood
it.
speaking. That's your childhood speaking. That
Yes,
was the childhood dish
exactly.
of choice in every Portuguese home, for sure. The comfort food.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I like that is it exactly. It's comfort food to me, and that's like why it's my favorite way to have it. Yeah, it's totally yeah, I grew up eating that and I still love it today. I can't ever quite make it. That's the one thing that I feel like I've never been able to quite make like the way that my mom did. So I'm still working on that one.
Yeah, there was something that she did to the with the egg mix or something that
Think so. I just
yeah,
can't get it
and
perfectly.
she didn't tell anybody.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a secret that maybe one day I'll get out of her.
Yeah, it'll be win or will. Oh, by the way, this is the
Yeah,
missing ingredient from the bacalhau brush.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
What to wait for.
we've got lapis, we've got polvo, we've got sardines, we've got bacalhau. A brush is the bacalhau dish because
Hmm.
bacalhau dishes there are hundreds
Uh-huh.
of bacalhau dishes. But
Yes.
bacalhau brush, I'm on board with that. That's good. Number five.
Yeah, that's a classic. Number five, I think I would have to go. I mean, I want to throw Presebge in there because I think it was
Yeah.
such, again, like a
Okay.
really unique seafood thing and one you can't really find in not many places. Um, if I had to throw a non-seafood dish in there, I have two non-seafood that I'll throw in. One is alcarta, which is like very famous in Terceira. And they like it's like meat and potatoes, but they cook it very slowly in these giant clay pots.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like another thing I grew up like my Ava used to make all the time and just grew up eating it. And I think it's something also that's kind of hard to find. Outside of even Terceira, like sometimes the other islands don't even have it very often. Like in
Yeah, I
my
haven't
opinion,
heard of it.
Terceira is like,
Al
yeah, Terceira
Carta?
is like, yeah, Alcarta. That's like where you have to go. And it's again
Hmm.
simple, but so good.
Okay. Number
And
seven. Last
then
one.
the other, yeah, the last one is the francesinha, which is like the fourth, yeah, you know.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I oh my goodness. It's weird. Like it's weird to say out loud what it is. Like every time I describe it to people, they're
Yeah.
like, that doesn't sound very
Go ahead,
good.
describe it in case people don't know what it is. Go ahead.
Well, it's like bread and then there's layers of like
How many
meat.
slices of
Like
bread? Like three or four?
there's like it's like stacked. Yeah, it's stacked high. There's like different meat, like cuts of meat. I feel like sometimes there's like hot dogs in it or like bacon and steak and then this
Yeah.
like
Bologna,
delicious sauce. Yeah, it's like random assortment of meats and then the sauce. It sounds like
cheese.
cheese. It sounds like what you would have when you're like hungover is like what you would
I
eat.
think it is what I think that's what happened. I think some guy, some French guy was hungover in Porto after Sarzois or something and invented the Francina. Yeah,
I
it
love
is a
it
good
though.
hangover food. And sometimes there's
Yeah.
an egg involved, sometimes
Yeah.
cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, then there's an egg on top. Yeah.
But then it's funny because you speak to the guys. My wife and I, many years ago, she was pregnant with our youngest son, and we just ate Francesinha for 3 days when we were in Porto,
Yeah.
and we were just like on the search for the best Francesinha, and all of them were very serious about it because they're like, "Yeah, it's a
Oh yeah.
Francesinha, it's junk food, but it's the bread needs to be good." The sauce has to
Yeah.
be perfect. The ingredients need to be right. So even there, they make sure that the ingredients are good.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I know. It's like so simple and yeah, seems like the ultimate like college hangover food, but it's like another comfort food, I guess.
Amazing. You get to see Portugal regularly.
Mm.
You see it in a different way to someone that potentially lives here. But for people that are wanting to know more about Portugal, for people that want to potentially move here and live here, what do you think people should know about our beautiful country?
One of the big things is that, Portugal has a very different pace, I feel like, especially compared to North America. Like here, I think it's very common to like get up at 5, 6, 7 a.m. and, start your workday right away. Whereas I feel like in Portugal, I don't even know where you would like find a coffee that's open, like a coffee shop open that early. Like it's a very different pace. And I think they've mastered work-life balance in a way that I'm very envious of because we do not have that in North America and we need we need more of it. Um, I think too, people in Portugal I think are very kind and generous. I think effort on, everybody's part goes a long way, like, like trying to learn the language and things like that. I feel like really, I know in most places in Portugal too, especially major cities, like people do speak English, but I think if you are planning to spend any sort of extended time there, it's always worth it to try to, make an effort to learn the language and communicate with locals. I feel like, again, as people who are like very proud of their culture, seeing you like try to appreciate it, it just then they're like, oh, okay, I immediately like this person because they're trying to like meet me where I'm at and they're not just going off in English and expecting me to know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, what would you mentioned the people, but why do you why do you think Portuguese people should be proud of their country?
I think there's a lot. I think obviously Portugal, came through a really difficult time as we were talking about, fairly recently and persevered through that and, really did so in a way that, the state of the world today, I don't know that a lot of disagreements could be settled as peacefully as they were
Yeah,
in,
it's
in
amazing.
Portugal in the end. And so, yeah, no, I think it's a testament to their resilience and their empathy and the fact that they were like, one, able to make it through such difficult times, and two, do so in a way that was so like calm and peaceful and come out, on the other end, even more resilient and empathetic and not like you could see very easily how people who've like been through something like that could be very like jaded and not as kind as they are. And I just feel like, my experiences in Portugal is everybody is very friendly and very kind. And I think there's so much to be proud of, just like the history and the culture. Obviously Portugal has done so much historically, globally in terms of like discoveries that are really cool to be proud of. I think Portugal has also, contributed a lot to like arts and culture and poetry. And then of course, food and wine. I think the whole like gastronomy of Portugal has like so much pride to it. Like I think, like you were saying, how you and your wife like always plan around restaurants. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do that as they come to Portugal with like food in mind. And I think that's something to be really proud of. Is like people are coming here because they want to experience like these dishes that we have created and we have preserved through generations. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really cool.
Yes, it is. What's one thing, Emily, that you'd like people to remember and to take away from our conversation? Just one thing.
Eat all the food. Go to Portugal and eat all the food.
Yeah,
That's my takeaway.
yeah, yeah. And you'll make a lot of people happy as well when they see you eating their food.
Yes, but just make sure you eat it all because you don't
Yeah,
ever want to
don't leave
send food
anything on the
back.
plate.
Don't,
Don't
no.
you will offend somebody. It's not about how much tip you leave or
Yes.
or how much you pay. It's don't leave food on the plate. Don't leave hungry.
I have a quick story because I made that mistake one time. One of my first visits to the mainland, I was in the Algarve and I ordered the like seafood rice, which was my first mistake because that is a dish for like
Normally two
normally
or
two
three people.
people.
Yeah.
But this one was for like four
Oh,
people, and I
geez.
ordered it just for myself. And I knew I was like, it was a small restaurant. This little old lady, like this little Ava, was cooking, and she brought it out to me. And I fought as hard as I could, and I maybe only ate half of it. And I thought she was going to make me sit there all night and finish it. She was so disappointed. I can never go back there again.
Did you at least take it away?
I tried, but she did not have takeout containers.
Ah, okay, yeah,
I
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I really
So
messed
it's one
up.
of those
So
real
don't make my
traditional places where
mistake.
you have to take your own takeaway containers, you know?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So don't do what I did.
Okay, so come and eat all the food. Don't forget that.
Yes,
Okay.
come hungry.
How can people follow you? Follow your work, see what you're up to.
Yeah, Seaside with Emily. That's my website, seasidewithemily.com. And then I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, Seaside with Emily.
Awesome. We'll put some links in the show notes and people can follow and see what you're up to.
Great.
Emily, finally, a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
I think we already touched on, the pace of Portugal is a little bit slower and intentional. But I think one of my favorite things about Portugal is community. Like everyone knows everyone, even whether you're on the small, villages in the Azores or you're in a big city like Lisbon, there's always this sense of like, we're all family and we're all looking out for one another and we're all going to break bread, and I love that community spirit, and I think truly the world needs more of it. So that's one of my favorite things about Portugal.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for being on the podcast. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I am like re-energized after talking about Portugal. It just makes me so happy, so I
Yeah, and
appreciate it.
you need to go have lunch. So
Yes, now I'm very hungry.
I'm gonna let you call it.
All right, that's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guests, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal the Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to the simple life.